right. First of all, is that Marjorie Wentworth there? That's Marjorie Wentworth. It's nice
Yes,
to
the
see
infamous
you.
Marjorie Wentworth.
Aha! I got to hear the story about misspelling on the birth certificate. Thank you for coming. And Candace and Michelle and Angelo, here we are again.
Yes, we are. How you doing, Ann? First of all, we haven't spoken in a little bit.
Right, but we've communicated.
Yeah, for sure.
I went to Hub City Writing in Place last weekend, and it's 2 nights at Wofford in the dorm. We have to step on the chair to get up on the bunk, and I am reconnected with some friends I had made prior and made some new friends. Tyree Day was the poet for the workshop from
Oh, wow.
UNC, and
Yeah.
he was really good. And the poets in our class were really good. It's bumped up. I mean, I've only been twice, but the level is so much more accomplished, and I guess some more confidence. I came home and spent Monday in my pajamas because it's so intensive. There were tears in our poetry workshop on Saturday afternoon and people writing excellent work and really tender, even not just the speaker, but those of us who are listening. I also, I have recognized something. I called my husband Saturday night in the death pose. You know what? I said, I think I'm too old for this. This is all really. However, he said, wait until tomorrow and see, because I don't usually talk about age that much. But what I have realized is not being able to see with my eyes and more with my ears and my feet and hands and skin. That, you see, I'm listening with this earbud in my ear. So at the workshop, so I'm typing my notes and that's coming into me. So then I hear Tyree and the other people with only one ear. And then I'm digitally typing and moving things around. In a workshop, you type and write, and then you read part of it. But
yeah,
I worked so hard on that. I'd done the homework, but just moving the parts around, that physically was tiring. So I just said, Anne, you did it with your eyes closed and one ear, and that counts for something. You showed up. Isn't that true? Just showing up for those things makes a difference. That's
that's
one
a
of the
word.
things I've been doing. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. We have two pastors, maybe more, but two that we know of. And that's a word. Just showing up takes a lot, right? For sure. I think that's super important. And I wanna honor what you said. So first of all, writers is Writers in Place. That's the name of it, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So talk about. I'm familiar with it to a degree, but like you can't just show up for that, right? Like that's a process for getting accepted in that.
No, I have not. No, you can apply.
Okay, but you
Margie, I
have to
don't
get
know if
accepted, right?
Margie knows.
Oh, might have to pay. I'm not sure. I forget.
Yeah, we have. I paid.
There's a fee to cover feed you, and they put you up, and but it's a great opportunity for everyone here. I mean, I love Hub City,
For
and they've just done so much. I mean, they have artist in residency programs now, and it's just kind of amazing what they've done. And they have a bookstore. I mean, it just goes on and on and on.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's incredible. Yeah. I guess the point I was making is that I don't think just any Joe Schmo off the street could probably get that. Like you still got to be a certain level of writer. And that's how,
I'm not. I don't know. Maybe the price kicks some people out, as it's not cheap, but it's also only 2 days, 2 days and 2 nights away, and it's only 2 hours from home, and that's valuable for me. I am not aware of that. That you have to be accepted to come. I'm just glad they let me in. There were about a dozen poets. It was down from the last 2 times I've been there. Of course, there are 2 years in the pandemic. Now, Marjorie, just to speak to, I went up, and here's another thing, with Danielle Verwers, who won the fellowship this year, and she also won a scholarship to this event. And I live near each other, so we rode up together, and sometimes we walk together in the park. And she has twin daughters and 2 older sons and a middle daughter. And I've met all of them. But Daniel and I rode up, and it was great to have car conversation, and we left at 10. So there was no traffic. And we circled around Wofford. Wofford was under quite a bit of construction. She kept saying, "Where's the sign that says Wofford College?" But one cool thing she did, and it reminded me to do, is connect with some poets in the upstate and being deliberate about that. And so we tried to reach 2 or 3 poets to join us for lunch on Friday. It didn't work out, but the phone conversations count as value. And Spartanburg was very charming, very sophisticated in my view, and it wasn't crowded in stores. And we went to the Hub City bookstore, of course, and bought tattoos, Jane Austen temporary tattoos. We were so busy we didn't even have time to put it on. And we also, they have this graffiti wall of authors. So we signed the authors wall, put our little names right on there with everybody else. Mine was near Ellen Malfras from Beaufort. You see Beaufort. But that made it fun and engaging. We also had a program from Hub City Press about what to do after you've signed the contract. It was really good. It was accelerated about maintaining your image in the community, maintaining connections, what doesn't seem to work, what does work, where to put your energies. And I took a lot of good notes. And then we had a professor, a teacher from the Governor's School for the Arts, Emily, kind of long last name. She didn't say it, and I didn't press her for it, but she teaches the English at the Governor's School. She was really good too.
Yeah.
It was all quality.
That's awesome. I actually have met Emily. So the youth poet,
Okay.
the youth poet laureate Raquel is actually she just graduated from the Governor's School, and Emily is one of her professors. Yeah, small world. Yeah,
that's what networking is.
yeah. So you're talking about Danielle, and I'm familiar with Danielle too. She's an amazing poet. But you're talking about that makes me kind of think about something someone told me years ago when I was doing poetry slam, like pretty early on, and they said what separates a good poet from a great poet is the company that they keep, right? Because it kind of like stunned me in the moment, because I thought I was good already, but but I really wasn't, right? But it, like, it made me think about like the iron sharpens iron kind of thing. So if I am around writers or poets who are on my level, or maybe not, then I'm not getting better, right? So like the better I am dependent on the people I associate myself with. And I was just curious with that relationship with Danielle and others, like how has that played a part in your work so far? Like in terms of the relationships with poets you have you seen that materialize into you becoming more proficient in your understanding of proficient in your craft? Or you feel like that has elevated you or changed you in any way?
Oh yes. Danielle and I just kind of linked up at PSSC in-person gathering, and Dear Corrigan met us up there. I was able to bring a note taker for half price, and so Delia was able to come as my quote note taker, which membership has its privileges and might as well play it. So I've met Tamara Miles recently. I went on the Congaree National Park PSSC hike. That wasn't long ago, and met some new people there. And then that afternoon, we went to Richland Library, where Equasi, the book was released. I met Herb Fraser was there. This was in person at the library. And Yvette Murray was there, and Tim Conroy, and Ed Madden, of course, and Al Black. And then someone from Charleston. And just being together felt so good. Larry Roof was there. He was not on the panel, but the others were. The subject was about reflections on race in South Carolina. And so it put all their essays in there. I just felt the conviviality, congeniality, collegiality there that was so strong. Danielle also records things for me. She recorded the Audre Lorde, The Reason for Poetry, that really distinctive essay. So she just did that for me. And that was such a wonderful gift. I also send the audio postcards. Some of you were involved in sending poetry postcards through the mail. So I began to think about audio postcards. But Jessica Jacobs in North Carolina and I exchange audio postcards occasionally. Like, I was on Dawn Chorus, and I let her hear the birds, and she was on the Oregon coast, and I heard the waves crash, and just a little bit is just a nice way to link and keep value. Life is really short, and we were talking about this prior to going live. Is our associations. Hey, is that Merlanda? Was in the poetry class. Hey, I saw her book at Hub City too. The community of poets around here has really been supportive, and we're all getting better at it. I like the bit of competition. I think that keeps me more on my toes, who won the prize, who won the fellowship, who's a finalist, who got published, and then who didn't get published. We all commiserate or was rejection letter. We all consider, you're a member of the club if you get that.
Yes.
So I've been intentional about making more friends with poets. I'd say, Marjorie, we're friends, aren't we? She put a quote on the back of my book, and she and I email each other. Let's see, this is my book. This is my book, for those who didn't see it, and Marjorie's on the back in the middle. I don't know if you can see it or not, but giving you a shout out, Marjorie. Also, I had this here. I almost wore it, but I don't think it shows. This is the PSSC long sleeve t-shirt. It is so comfortable. I do long sleeve t-shirts, and it's just a way to support PSSC. I love this shirt. So I recommend it. You can go order a thermos or short sleeve shirts or some other things, maybe a visor on there. Again, I'm being much more selective with how I spend my time, with whom I spend my time. I was saying I've been distanced by some people within the last couple of years for a variety of reasons. And it's not just one person, just different approaches. And then I've had to distance myself I've had to on one occasion, and then I chose to, a more subtler, in another occasion. And the point being to pivot more to poetry events and less on things that were distracting from my poetry. So how about you? How's are you doing one verse of your poetry? You had a festival last year in the summer?
Oh yeah. So we had that was beautiful, by the way. All of that was really insightful. But One Word Poetry Festival. Yeah, of course. One Word Poetry Festival. So we had our second one actually in April. And so that was amazing. We tried to be a little bit more ambitious. So the first year it was 3 days, and we expanded to 5 days. So needless to say, I was exhausted at the end of it. But it was a beautiful time. You know, we had like the Youth Poet Laureate. We crowned our new Youth Poet Laureate. We did a Winthrop Student Poet Showcase as well, which is something different that we didn't do last year. And that was really cool to get the students. And I work there, but I don't work in that capacity. So I don't always get to hear students read unless they come to like an open mic I host or something. And so that was really good for those creative writing students, and to hear the incredible work they're doing there as well. Just amazing, amazing stuff. And then we had a number of things. We had a poetry slam competition, and we had a poetry brunch, and had Rachel McKibbins, who was our keynote poet for that. And Rachel is a nut in a good way, in a funny way, and just super funny person. We were laughing the entire time, and it was like, you know, sometimes you meet people, and I feel like this with you, Ann, honestly, is that people that you maybe have met online, and then you meet them in person, and we haven't even met in person yet, you and I, but you feel like you connect with them instantly, right? And that was that same kind of thing with her. It was like we had inside jokes in the first 5 minutes of meeting each other, you know, that will always be there. You know, and sometimes we text each other just a random line or whatever, and then we just kind of run with it. So that was really cool to have that connectivity, right? When I'm talking about community and poetry, and I've always believed that's super important for me, especially because coming in, like my background, I guess you would say, is spoken word and slam. And in slam, you form these teams that go against each other. So from the first time I was on the poetry team, like the idea of community and sharpening each other's skill was like a thing. You couldn't be a poet in that space and not be in community to a degree, because that's the whole point of it, right? Like you have to have, you know, relationship with the people on your team. You create group poems together. So there's poems like you have people that you do poems together and perform them together. So that like being ushered in that way has made me always understand the beauty of community in that space. So anytime I meet a poet, or whether it's somebody I look up to or not, or someone that looks up to me for whatever reason, I don't know why they would do that, but you know, those kind of things, I would just believe in extending that friendship, right? Because we're writers, like we're not superstars, you know, we're poets. And even if you are a superstar writer, it's like you're a writer at the end of the day, you know. And so we're connected in that. And so I just think that's, you know, a beautiful thing to do that. And I think as I'm doing more and my name's getting out a little bit more, and doing things like this, it's great to meet other South Carolina poets, or Carolina poets in general. And so I just really believe like we have a lot of great artists and writers here, and I think people are starting to take notice. And so the more that we do together, and we see people like you and Marjorie and Marlanda and others that are like really putting their work out there, I think it just amplifies what we're all trying to do, right? That's great. And by the way, this is a side note, what I just said, but Marjorie also did a blurb for my book too. So you know, we have that in common. And how many groups of people can say together in the same space that the former poet laureate of their state wrote a blurb for their book, right?
Yeah.
It's part of my job. It's part of my job. But I love
Not really, because
books. That was a joy, both of you. So, you know, both
Thanks.
of them.
Yeah, well, thank you. But you didn't have to, and it's our debut books too. So it's not like, you know what I mean?
But I don't mean to jump in, but Angelo, it sort of speaks to what you're saying. You know, it's a community, and we support one another, and it's you know, it's all about love, you know, like we're, you know, all in this together, and it's so exciting to see what you've both done, and I love being a little bit of it. So, you know,
I think, Marjorie, with your teaching, and Angelo, with your inviting the Winthrop poets, I am intentional about encouraging people who are closet poets.
Yes.
And I've told them about the contests that are free, and try this, and fall lines, and the Comet, and some of them have been accepted, and they just beam, and that makes me so happy. Another thing is, anyway, trying to pull a variety of people in. Another thing I'm very proud of is that I was the third person to nominate Ed Madden for the Governor's Award for the Arts, and dadgummit, he won it this time. And Marjorie, you put in a letter, and that was intense. for me, the academic, the letters and the careful spelling and the editing. I have an assistant, fortunately, Sarah, who's been with me 8.5 years now.
Yeah, but that's
Suma-
so much work, Anne. So kudos.
It's
to
a
you.
lot of work. Yeah. But he got a great big heavy statue, like an Oscar woman
Much the same
version.
as me. It weighs the same as me. It's like, it's crazy.
Oh, and then so there were the other two winners, Lee Snell Grove, who does so much for One Columbia, and Darius the thespian,
Who's
Yeah.
amazing.
amazing. And there's Heather McEwen. Does Heather work at the library? There's another Heather, either McHugh or McEwen. She nominated. I'm follow up on that. Darius, and I went with a friend, and he said, "You're gonna love her. She has pink hair and kitty cat glasses." Yay! Again, we clustered in little groups at the Museum of Art and moved around, enjoyed each other's company, and just kind of caught up. I'll say I'm going to ask Bill to read one of my poems as a result of this last weekend. So I chipped it down. I did, Marlanda, you were there. I did, Danielle read it for me as much as I could. And, but again, I showed up, I tried to participate. So now I've whittled it down. Bill, this is the one, A Girl in Wild Country.
Okay. And that's a brand new poem?
Brand new poem.
Oh my gosh. Okay. So, Growing Up Girl in Wild Country by Ann-Chadwell Humphries. July. I'm outside between my mother's knees as she slathers lavender gel into my natural curls to straighten my hair like girls in teen magazines. The chemicals make me faint, a price I am willing to pay. Unlike the time she wrestled my sisters and me to cut our hair like Julie Andrews in Sound of Music, because she said so. Easter dawn at the Overlook, fog curls from the river. A shaggy barked cross of freshly cut cedar opens its arms to the view. The men had loaded the upright piano into a goat trailer to push uphill for the community sunrise service. That morning, three sisters in shades of pastel, cotton sheen trimmed in daisy braid, sang a children's hymn, our mother sewing until 2 a.m., a lock of black hair lazing over her brow. She made sure our hair was as shiny as our shoes. Another day, sweat and leather filled the barn as we unsaddled our horses. We blew hair from our eyes as we hosed and brushed the horses and braided their manes. Early that day, we had emerged from a green canopy shading a secret, steep trail we had made to a ridge with infinitely rolling hills. We dismounted and became Julie Andrews, twirling and twirling.
So that poem, Marlanda heard it in its raw form. The first part was about my mom. So this is the mid-60s, and I was just our challenge was to write about place, be real specific about place, and what kind of song would we put with our place, and help the reader inhabit the location and the time, and then see it with new eyes. Marlanda, you can jump in here too. To see it with new eyes. So 5 experiences, 5 senses, just 5 examples of 5 senses. And so it is from that this poem came, but also what Tyree was doing, which I found really valuable, that drew me, is the conveyance of emotion in images. And I had kind of lost some confidence before I went. My dad died in the spring, and I was concentrating obviously on, I'm not sad, I just reflective, because he was a wonderful man. But I wanted to put my bandwidth on the family, and there were just a lot of conversations and travel back and forth to Texas. But only this weekend kind of was I able to, well, I guess during that workshop, Miranda, was I able to get something on paper. And that's what I needed. I needed a push, not a nudge, because I'm usually very self-motivated. Then I reconstructed it, worked on it, and then I workshopped it with a group of, there's 6 of us in there who meet monthly, we Zoom, and they workshopped it last week for me. And one particularly liked that last line about twirling and twirling in the Julie Andrews up on the hill. And I had a deeper, darker ending on it, but having the conversation with that group made me think, no, this is childhood. This is the tone. This is the tone I want to set, and something refreshing. So that's a little evolution of that poem. You have one, Angelo? Read us one.
Yeah, I can absolutely read you one. Let me ask you a question before I do that, though, before I lose it. So when you're putting yourself, there's a beautiful poem. When you put yourself, when you're writing about place, are you putting yourself in the place? Or are you visualizing yourself? Like, are you smelling the trees? Are you feeling like?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. What was tricky is, well, we picked our place, and then we had to look at it as if we were a first timer and make our imaginations imagine, see other things we might not otherwise see. So part of the smell exercise, so I picked that location, which is often a base for me in poetry. A lot of poems come from that time when we lived way out in rural Texas. And I was self-conscious that here's a, middle-class white lady writing about her childhood in Texas, blah, blah, blah. But with Tyree, he gave me more confidence to really dig into that emotion that can be a real connection to the reader. So that was one of the smells, that hair straightener, and I did faint, but that's what you did then.
Yeah, that's awesome. I always find it like interesting what people do to put themselves in the space of a poem that especially is a scene, right? Like, just is very interesting. I do a lot of the same things for sure.
You do?
Yeah. Like I try to think of, especially if it's like a recall, like I try to remember the things from a different vantage point, right? So if I'm if I'm riding in a car, and the poem's about me riding in a car, I try to think, okay, what were the trees seeing as they were watching me drive back past?
Oh, right? From that way, yeah.
Kind of thing, yeah. And then like, what was the car beside me? What did they see or what did they hear? Like what was the ambient noise? I think that's the beautiful part. That's the poem within the poem, right? Like it's like those other things that exist that we may not have thought about in any other instance.
Yeah.
So that being said, I'm gonna stop talking now and I'm gonna read a poem since you told me to read.
Yes.
Shut up and read the poem is basically what you just told me, which I love.
You read a poem, Angela.
So
please read a poem.
So this poem, you made me want to almost read something different, but I'll read this. It kind of sets a little bit of place. A lot of my work in this book, More God Than Dead, shameless plug, is about grief and resilience. And so like a lot of the poems are either about collective grief or singular grief. And so this is kind of touching on my idea of collective grief. Black grief is a seance. Black grief is the inside joke America puts on mute. A silent film no one has the attention span to watch unless the body is soaked in gunpowder thrown from foreign hands. Timelines and status updates flash the dead names like a marquee, while the hashtag is hungry to add more to its collection. If the grief isn't sexy or comical, we don't have space for it here. If the chest wasn't seared by a bullet or neck mangled from a noose, it isn't worth the airtime.
Ooh.
If the man's heart stopped thumping, if the woman's blood clotted to infinity, if the boy's cells sickled a symphony of submission, if the girl's lungs howled into the wind, the channel gets turned before the broadcast even begins. Black grief is a rite of passage. We are taught the weight of death before our legs sprint towards playgrounds and jungle gyms. We know that someday soon, someone who looks like us will become corpse before their 16th birthday. We know it could very easily be us. Whether through cancer or traffic stop, our lives can fade heavier into a darkness heavier than the melanin our skin holds. So we treat death like a celebration. Call it a homegoing instead of a funeral. Dance until the ancestors shake beneath us. Cry until the sobs become songs. Pray as though the body sitting at the front of the church can actually hear us. Black grief is tangier than Carolina barbecue, thicker than grandma's cornbread, saltier than collard greens simmering over swollen heat. It is a gospel song coded in regret, a Mahalia Jackson wail, Marvin Sapp singing Never Would Have Made It without knowing if we actually will.
Oh. Where is that in your book?
That is, what page is that? That's page 20. I'm sorry. Let me go back. Page 21. Page 21 in the book.
Oh, what's on either side? Is your book in 3 parts?
It's in 2 parts, actually. So,
Two
yeah.
parts, okay.
Great question. Thank you. Nobody's asked me that. So the first part is kind of, I would say the first part is the grappling with losing something, right?
Okay.
You know, in my case, you know, a lot of the book is about losing my late wife. And so it's like when in the midst of when the loss happens, it's like you're grabbing at straws, trying to find sense of something. And then the second part of the book is more so after you've come to terms with it, like now, what does it look like? Right. So like the first poem in my second part of the book is called Definition, and it pretty much defines like what a widower is to me. And so the rest of the book, I think, is from that lens. It's like, okay, now that I've kind of like got a handle on what this is, here's what it looks like, you know, for the remainder of the collection.
How many poems are in your book?
Oh, how many poems? I think it's about 30, 32 poems ish.
Okay.
Something around there. But it's a short, I mean, it's a fairly short book. Total, it's about 80 pages total.
Yeah, that's what mine is too. Look how skinny it is. It's very svelte.
Yeah.
It's very svelte and sophisticated. That's my line. That a lot packed in so few words.
Yeah. But I think that makes for an easy read.
Pardon?
I think that makes for an easy read too, though, right? Like if it's not, you know, too much. Especially if the subject matter gets heavy. Like you don't want 200 pages of heaviness. You know, you want to have something that's a little gets you in and get you out. You know.
So did Ed help you? Ed Madden was your editor. Did he help you with the 2 parts and grouping the poems? Or did you do that?
That was actually his idea, actually. Because my original thought was like before the manuscript became like, you know, the final version of itself, I had an idea to do like 3 parts. And then he was like, why are you doing that? You know, like, why would you do that kind of thing? But he did say, but it was really good criticism and feedback. And then he said, you know, I think maybe like, because it was a certain poem, the definition poem, I really wanted to be the first poem in the book, right? And he was like, yeah, it's good, it's really good, it's really good. But there's another poem I think should really start this book, right? And that's the one I ended up using. And he said, but you can make a second part, and then that poem can be the first poem in that second part. And then that's when I started like arranging and like, oh yeah. So I started arranging the poems based on what I thought the story I was telling, right? And so yeah, so that's how it kind of materialized. But Ed gave the original idea for that, which I'm thankful that he did.
My book is in 3 parts, and the image I love is how he deals the paper on his green sofa, and then on the floor, on the side of the sofa and the seat of the sofa. And he just keeps dealing the poems until they begin to stack up and start talking to each other. So he was more involved in ordering mine. And he's just so excellent. And his criticism is growth. It's not, it's okay. He knows what he's talking about. I'm learning from him.
Yeah, it was so hard for me because like, there's certain poems that they call it demoitis in music. Like when you create a song and then you listen to the song a whole bunch of times and then you have to later go back and change it. But you're so in love with the original version of it, right? I had demoitis, I think, with a couple of the poems in this book. And he was like, the poem ends right here. I'm like, yeah, Ed, but listen, man. The rest of this just goes, man. You know what I mean? And so I had to really like just be okay with just kind of stopping at a certain point with some of those poems. But I think some of that comes from like, in a not to bring it back to poetry slam and spoken word, but like we elaborate on the point, right? A lot of the time. Like that's kind of the point of it, is to look at this thing and what's the viewpoint, what's the different ways you can dissect it and analyze it. And that works really well in performance, but it doesn't always work well on paper. And so I had to just be okay with just like, okay, I'm gonna end it right here, and that's great. And his suggestions were spot on, but it was hard for me at first to kind of let go of that, some of those. But those versions still exist. I read like 2 of them in my book release, and I'm like, I'll probably never read these again because it's not in the book. But here I'll share these versions.
Yeah, read one of the old versions. Even for us, it's kind of like it's a secret. Like we're privileged or something.
Yeah.
You read another one, and then I'll ask Bill to read another one of mine.
Okay. You want me to read one now?
Yes.
Okay.
Thanks. I'll make an executive decision. Go.
I love how you quarterbacking this. So I'm gonna go a little lighter. This poem is called "Black Girl Fly." Black girl fly. My girl is fly. And not fly as in helicopter or airplane or kite cascading across a sunset. I mean fly as in dope, fresh, trendy, sexy. So fly, the wind asks for her permission to speak. So fly, NASA consults her before sending shuttles beyond this galaxy. Fly like black birds somersaulting on a blue playground of sky. Fly like stiletto heels tall enough to reach heaven's backyard. Fly like walking into a room and stealing the spark in everyone's faces, turning any venue into a runway. Fly like she came to slay everything, and all you can do is watch yourself become prey. So fly, every follicle of hair is laid like a prayer, bowing to the temple of her edges. So fly, she convinces me to buy her sundresses every summer, like spending my money is her favorite pastime. She'll flash a smile and say, Ange, in a tone that weakens the grip on my wallet and serenades the crease of my lips into a smile I can't resist. So fly, I never complain. I gladly carry anything her flesh leaves an imprint on. My girl is so fly, she makes me believe gravity doesn't have jurisdiction over this blanket of flesh, and flight is our native tongue. So fly, she makes a hospital gown look like Fashion Week. So fly, the nurses at CMC Pineville know her by name, greet her with a smile that says, I hate you're back here, but I'm also happy to see you. So fly, she's had more surgeries than birthday parties. So fly, the doctors gave her 6 months to live and she refused to stick to their timeline. So fly, she talks to God on a first name basis and writes a gospel with her tongue.
Amazing. Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Anybody else get goosebumps? What a wonderful tribute.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Ann. I appreciate that.
And Ann and Angelo, I just want to lift up. Everyone's pretty much muted, but I can see the goosebumps. So.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that.
That's wonderful. One of my, I do the library reading challenges because I like a deadline. I like to finish a project, have a project, finish it. Last summer, it was learning to read 2 children's books in Braille. It took all summer to read 2. And I still was reading with my fingers like a first grader. But I won a Kindle from Talking Books. And
Nice.
I gave that to my Braille teacher who volunteered. She's retired, School for the Deaf and Blind. And it's just amazing how we find each other. I had found early on in my diagnosis blockades and cultures of low expectations that just drove me nuts. So then I come to the Talking Books library, and they have, well, the USC Department of Disabilities, like, here, we're here for you. What can we do for you? And it just, whoa, opening new ways. This summer, my reading challenge was to read through all the Psalms because of their poetry and learn about the poetic forms used in the Psalms. And I've taken my time and made notes. I did the first 1 to 88 in NRSV, which is what our denomination does. But then I switched to KJV. And so I'm writing down the deer pants by the sea and the mountains skip like rams and all this beautiful language. But NRSV was good too. So I was reviewing my notes just for the, is it fecund that means gravid's what I mean, the gravid rich language. And so I'm going to ask Bill to read a poem or a psalm I wrote. I'm sure some of the others of you have written a psalm, but it was fun to write and refer to the language. So Bill.
Here we go. This is entitled, Untitled Psalm by Ann-Chadwell Humphries. My faith is my taproot. It grows deep as the seas. It grows a mighty oak. Its shade cools and comforts me. Its branches whisper their wisdom. When wild wind and lightning lash me, its leafy arms encircle me. It promises not that catastrophe never befall me. Rather, in any catastrophe, it will never abandon me. Its power extends me beyond me. It pours blessing and honor upon my bowed head. Its goodness guides and fortifies me. It is in this faith that I will trust forever and forever.
Okay. So that's the first reading. Have you written poetry of the psalm?
Not intentionally, but I've heard that.
Yeah.
I've heard that one of my poems kind of be that, but yeah, I think that's such a beautiful that's a beautiful poem, and that's a beautiful way to write it, right?
Yes. I went by syllables and by lines and tried to match what, of course, it's based on 23rd Psalm because that's an easy one.
Yeah.
And pick up. So, and that was workshop. Actually, I had an earlier version of that and workshop. So my friends gave me critique. So this is another version. And, I look at it and I say, oh, it could be so much better, but hey, it's on the paper. This is good enough for now. It's made it. Yeah. It's made it out of my head. Bill, how's our time?
We started late. We're about an hour in. You have as much time as you would like. And we will, I think because so much conversation has already happened, we might shorten the Q&A. So whatever you and Angelo decide is really fine. So.
Well, Angelo, I'm kind of interested in what the audience questions might have.
Yeah, I'm with you.
You okay with that? Are there
for
commentary? We've got a distinguished audience here.
As as we go there, I just and I don't know whether and Angelo, whether or not you're able to see all the messages. Marge sent me a couple that were coming out that I wanted to make sure got to you. Can read them aloud. So there were some wows. There were some from Angelo, your first poem, "You Break My Heart," Angelo. Loved hearing that poem so much. And just really, really deep and wonderful responses in the chat here. So,
Thanks. I did not hear them. I don't know, Angela, you could read them.
Yeah, I didn't see them either. I think they're in a private chat to Bill, I believe. But
yeah, they probably went to me. That's probably why. But that may have just been because Marge and I were back and forth about a PSSC T-shirt. So.
And the marketer did it again and did it again.
That is a comfortable shirt. Does anybody have any questions, or you've written some comments? Candace, I'm glad you're here. And Michelle, I think you all go to worship together, I believe. And Marlanda, I don't even know where you're from, Marlanda. I did see your book in Hub City. So anybody comment?
I have a question. This is Marlanda. Yeah. I'm in Georgetown, South Carolina, and but I
know you. I know you. Libby Bernadine's told me about you. You are that person.
That's funny. Let me come back on the screen. I have my dog, and he's a little sick tonight, so I'm doing a lot.
Okay.
But my question is for both of you, Ann and Angelo. Congratulations to both of you on your book, on your books. You both talked a lot about revision, and when you talked about demoitis, I completely understood. And I guess my question is, how do you navigate? What helps you get to what the poem wants to be apart from what you want the poem to be? So what helps you kind of step away from whatever your hopes are or your intentions are so that the poem can grab you and become what it wants to be? What helps you do that?
Thanks. That's a hard question, but
Great question.
You go ahead, Angelo.
Oh, okay. Man, awesome. I think I honestly think it's people that I trust to read them. I think that's part of it. So, we all, I'm sure, have a collection of folks that you trust to send your work. They're not going to steal your work, but they're proficient enough that they can give you good feedback. And so a lot of the time it's like, man, I'm struggling with this line or where to end this poem, or if this is it or not. And then they'll give you, valuable feedback on that. So I think that makes me more okay with it. Right? Because honestly, I probably already know the poem ended 2 stanzas ago. I think I already know that. But because I got so excited about whatever this is, and I started expanding on it. And now it's like 6 stanzas later, 6 stanzas later, it's like, because I got excited. But really, I already know internally that the poem's already ended. I read poems all the time, and it's like, oh man, this is a great poem. If they had stopped right here, then it would have been like, really good. So I already know that internally. So when I get the confirmation from somebody, like, I think this is it. It already makes me like, okay, that's confirmation that I already kind of knew that. Also for me, physical space from the poem. So, after I've written it for a while, I just need the distance. So I need to do something else.
Oh, okay.
Listening to music, walking my dog, going somewhere else, and then coming back with fresh eyes later on, and it's like, oh yeah, what was I doing here? Sometimes it's like, man, you were writing this poem, and then sometimes it's like, what were you doing in this part right here, right? But so and so that allows me that space, like the physical space and distance from. But also, the poem still exists, right? Like that version still exists. It doesn't have to go away. So if you really do love it, it doesn't mean that it wasn't good. It just means that it doesn't need to exist in one particular spot, but it was created. So it's still a thing that you can revisit if you want to. And that's why I don't believe in like deleting poems anymore. It's like I got like maybe 5 versions of the same poem. So I can go back and just see what I was doing, or some of those lines might become lines for other poems, you know. But that's what I do personally to kind of disconnect from that.
Marlanda, one thing, this poem about Girl in Wild Country, I used some of the things Tyree was telling us to do. Remember, he talked about intuition versus intention. That was on Saturday afternoon. And sometimes a poem is telling you something. And another thing is, what is extraneous? What is distracting from the poem? What was the thing, the lesson he was telling us? But I got that from him. Now, I have revised poems that have looked like terrible plastic surgery. I've ruined them. And I don't know if I can even go back. I want to. I've tried to resurrect some of them, but Marlanda, just sometimes you got to just stop and trust. Unlike Angelo, mine did not start until the middle. Several of my poems, he just cut the top off of them, trimmed them real good haircut, as I've said, and from there. So I had some preamble technique to work on eliminating. What's going on with your poetry, Marlanda? Aren't you? Do you have a book? Or are you giving? I recommend Marlanda for a guest.
Yes.
For Tuesday Duets.
Yes.
I know you're presenting.
Duly noted.
Okay.
Yeah. And congrats on your book, Marlanda, by the way.
Oh yeah.
You both are very generous. Thank you. I right now I'm resting after tour. So I am just with my dog who I miss very much. That's what I'm doing. Yeah.
Did Hub City publish it?
Yes.
And what's the name of it?
Thresh and Hold.
THRESH.
That's right.
Okay.
Like the act of threshing rice.
Yeah. I've heard some amazing things about it, which is not surprising at all. I know you for some time, so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
For sure.
Do you have, I guess, a website?
I do. I can put it in the chat, but I don't, I'm here to hear you two, which I know we're all generous and we all share, but I'm really here for y'all.
Okay.
to listen to you all.
We had maybe a dozen people in our class, and I was asking the racial composition, and I was also matching voices, which I couldn't, because I couldn't distinguish that way, matching voices. But Marlanda, you were in front of me. I was behind you. Is that right? You were far left?
I was in front of you.
So because I was facing her back, so we were in another workshop the next morning, and we happened to sit next to each other. And I said, Marlanda, excuse me, I didn't get a chance to talk to you. So I introduced myself, and I'm so glad I did, just because the quality was good. Let's see what else I want to talk about, or what other questions you might have.
I think I saw Candace's hand, I think.
Yeah.
Okay. Candace,
you could just unmute, or you could put it in the chat. I could voice it either way.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are.
I'm just so appreciative of being here, and I just had all kinds of different feelings from all of the work that you've done, and expressing gratitude. And just a little, I'll be very brief, but Bill invited me because at Circular, I chair the Inclusion and Accessibility Mission Group. And I think what stood out for me was I was just really relating to a lot of what you were talking about in terms of your the newer blindness, being newly blind. And when you were talking about early on cultures of low expectations, were you experiencing that as a newly, is it okay to say newly blind?
Yeah. It was gradual.
Words,
Adult onset blindness. It was gradual. I could work. They told me, don't overthink it. Just get into it and take classes and work on your skills. And it's not hurting, it's not fatal, but it will go dark. And I can see a little sliver of the moon. At least I imagine I do. That's real important to me. But yes, in some of the quote rehab, preparing me through low vision. And then that's a whole country into itself.
Mm-hmm.
And then working and having consultants from the Commission for the Blind come in and adjust my computer. I didn't care. I didn't tell anybody I was blind when I first went, but I could still see some, and I could still think and work and move around. But I very much butted heads with, I was incensed by 1, 2, 3 organizations. Like, really? Is this what you're teaching me to do? When I'm wanting to get the digital copy of Angelo's book. And I might ask Cindy about that. And Miranda's book. I have talking books. So that's another of my research projects, is to get more accessibility. Now, I use the high, large print hymnal for a while and large print Bible, but eventually I could not, I couldn't read it. So my husband speaks the hymns, the words of the hymns to me, and I'm listening. So he's not singing, I'm not singing. I think what broke the ice too is I had a guide dog that was remarkable, and the whole congregation pitched in. They wanted me to succeed, and they see me succeed and live life fully. Now I've taught people how to, and do sighted guide. I've taught people that, and I've taught people how to find a chair for me, put my hand, tap it and we can talk about it some more. And this is for blindness or low vision. But a lot of people are losing their vision as they age. Macular, diabetic retinopathy, and glaucoma. And when it's later in life, it's harder. See, I had 20 years to prepare.
Right.
20 years to prepare. And gradually, like he said, went to the donut, to the straw. And I took advantage of things that gave me confidence. Like there's an organization that confidence is like a bank account to me. It needs to be attended, and the same with poetry. It needs to be attended and nurtured as much as a bank account. So I latched on to this cross-country skiing. I went cross-country skiing with my guide dog because there was an organization that did that for me. Now, poetry, to me, helps me be the person I want to be. I remember at a workshop saying, this poetry, this is how I want to spend the rest of my life. This is it. This is it. Because it makes me authentic. And I think, wouldn't you all agree that writing helps you speak more clearly? Now, one disadvantage is when people are wordy, I just want to get to the point, cut that out. It's the oral. So I have to watch myself for interrupting or kind of move people on to the next point. I guess I'd be like a sheepdog.
Or quarterbacking, as Angela said. But I can understand that because you really, need, with this onset, you sort of really, you may not be taking in all the visual cues anymore, things like that. So you just kind of want somebody to can you just say it plainly? Can you just say it plainly? I have to do that too. I have to say, can you just kind of give me the bottom line here? It's like, but yeah.
Well, just even having a committee, our church had one too. and it was good for
Mhm.
all of us. And teaching people, you can speak up, please let us know.
Right.
When my dad, when I was worshiping with him down in Texas, and it was Easter, and he took my finger and traced it across the top of the print on the bulletin. Now,
Mhm.
I couldn't really recognize it, but just the gesture was so nice.
Mm.
It was so loving. So about accessibility, we can talk more about it. But I like the person poetry has made me. I think it's helped my faith, my confidence. I think it gives you some celebrity status, actually. Angelo, do you agree? It's it
Definitely can. Yeah, to a degree, right? I
yeah,
mean,
to agree. Maybe it's the skills, but I acknowledge that, but I also put that aside. I use it as trying
yeah.
to be wise, try to be not wisecracking, but to be thoughtful
Mhm.
of that poetry.
Beautiful. How about we have one more question, and we can continue offline with more of this.
Yeah, yeah.
But there are people watching and will be watching the recording later who are not going to be able to ask questions. So, Reverend Michelle, you had a question?
Yes, maybe a question and some observations, perhaps. I am struck by how much the craft advice around writing poetry and constructing it
Mhm.
correlates with sermon writing.
Ah,
For me, at least, there is a real connection here. Say it plainly. Invoke as many senses as you can. Be specific.
Mhm.
Call it out. Speak it out. Get to the point. All
Mhm.
of those things are things that I have had to learn about sermon writing.
Mhm.
I came from a background of intellectual, stuff of academia and writing for academia and all that means, which frankly is a lot of wind sometimes and not much substance. And learning to, and it's also coming from here, right? For me, at least, when I've written poetry, it comes from here, it comes from the heart. And that's where sermon writing for me, I've learned comes from too. So I
yes.
have gained so much from y'all, from listening to you discuss your craft. Just so helpful.
Thanks. That's good.
Mhm.
See the parallels.
Absolutely.
I've never written a sermon. I've tried to write short fiction or flash fiction, but I've written the memoirs. People asked me to write about my guide dog, but I just got lost in the words, the chapters.
Mhm.
So poetry has the boundaries of stanza and line breaks and structure that make me feel safe.
Aw.
That's such an insightful point. Poetry has boundaries.
Beautifully said.
So,
I'm going to put that on my car in one of those bumper stickers, so.
What are you going to put on it?
I love what you said. It's so succinct, that kind of the boundaries help you to
Yeah.
feel safe. They're not constraints. It gives you that sense of just feeling safe. I think that's beautiful.
Thanks. Bumper guards, people looking out for you. That's kind of how
Absolutely.
I look at it.
So
Anyway.
we're approaching
Yes.
7:30. I think
Yes.
what I'm going to do is wrap up,
Yes.
and the Zoom can continue, but for our online presence and our Facebook Live, I think we're going to wrap it up. I just wanted to say, the reason I'm not preaching like Reverend Michelle here is because I tend to be wordy. So I don't know whether the prescription is Ed Madden or not yet for me, but I really appreciate that those two of you who have lifted up his work and your own work in this conversation is really really given me inspiration.
Good.
More is not always better. sometimes, as in my first training in sermon writing, someone advised, Bill, it gets easier because you don't have 3 months to write it. You have a week. So Reverend Michelle is touching her nose and pointing at me. So anyway, I want to thank our featured poet. I want to thank Reverend Michelle for bringing just an absolutely lovely prayer and moment and reflection. Ann and Angelo, this has really been a delight. I really love where you went with this, that it wasn't just your poems, but it's so much about you, and that you engage so many people here on Zoom in your conversation. I so appreciate that, and so appreciate your gifts to this series. I have more questions. I'm going to hold them. You've already asked each other the question that I often ask Tuesday Duets featured artists to whether or not they have questions for each other. You anticipated that. You went there already. So I just want to thank you so much. I put in the chat the Ann and Angelo's latest books, An Eclipse and a Butcher from Muddy Ford Press, from Ann-Chadwell, and Angelo T. Jeter's brand new book, More God Than Dead, also from Muddy Ford Press this year. If you want to be added to our email list for Tuesday Duets, send me an email at strandlinebreak@gmail.com, and friend me on Facebook. Please speak up to younger poets. This is really important that we learn how to think, and we learn how to think through beautiful and structured language. And I really appreciate that. Just a quick note before we go. I am taking the month, Tuesday Duets is taking the month of August off.
Okay.
I was thinking as the French take off the month, but it's so hot there, I don't think they're enjoying it much. But that's what I intend to do. I might even get a haircut and do some more writing of my own work. So please stay with us if you'd like for more conversation. And thank you for being here, those of you online and those of you watching later. It's really it's a privilege to have your attention, and was such a privilege to have the three of you here as guests.